Hello, everyone. My name is Belinda, and I am a CWS Community Engagement Specialist. I work with communities in Northern Maryland, Eastern Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And I am so excited to have you all here at our first fall crop chat series. Whoop, whoop. Today's episode is called Recruitment and How to Make It Happen. And we're just going to be talking about all things recruitment. We're going to be hearing about how to recruit team captains, planning teams, and even civic groups, just so that we can cover a range of all the different people that we can recruit into the amazing work that we are all doing here. So let's get started. So first we have Dave Miller, who we see here on the screen. Hello, Dave.
Hello, hello. Uh,
Hello. So if we could just start with an introduction for you. Where do you hail from?
okay. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been here most of my life, except I've been up in New Jersey a bit too. So
Okay.
I'm down here. I have been involved with the crop walk for about 13 years now. I was formerly in a nonprofit myself. In fact, one of our partner agencies, Crisis Assistance Ministry. So they got me into it, and I wanted to stay into it because I love what we do here. Uh,
Nice.
we have we've got a team of about just up front there. We got about 43 teams now in our area here in Charlotte here, and we'll talk about some of them too. But we have had a great year last year. Looking for a good year this year. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I personally love Charlotte. It's such an amazing area. A little humid though. The South
Yeah,
is the South. So I'm happy to
right.
be up here in Virginia. But awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. So let's get started with just a few questions on how to recruit team captains or some best practices. So when you look at recruiting team captains, because that's something that's constantly happening, whether you're in walk season or out just to prepare, what characteristics do you think recruiters should be looking for in team captains?
Well, having been working in both the nonprofit and the for-profit, frankly, there's a lot of similarity between hiring. You're actually hiring somebody is what you're doing in a way. So you're going
Hmm.
through a hiring schedule. So you're looking for people that are dependable. You're looking for people that have been involved in volunteering. Maybe they have recruited a volunteer or been a volunteer themselves. It helps if you've been one, because that way you can feel what it's like when you're recruiting one too.
Right.
A couple of key things though. I really, having worked with a nonprofit, I'm really looking for somebody that's really got some empathy, that really cares about what we're doing, that really understands the mission, that really understands that we're here to help people who are dealing with hunger and poverty and all the other programs that Church World Service does. So that's something I really look at. And another key thing is, do they show any passion? Do they have the personality, and do they really care about it? Is one thing I'm most interested in, because if they're not interested, it's really not going to be a good match. So we want to make sure we recruit somebody that understands what we do and that we understand who they are as well. So that's some of the characteristics I look for.
Important, especially your first piece with empathy, making sure that they actually care about what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, with a team captain's position, you are also going out there and fundraising and telling people, hey, join my team, and this is why we're doing what we do. And if you don't care about what you're doing, then you probably can't explain what you're doing, and then that can't bring people onto the team to
Yeah.
better fundraise for the original goal. So
Yeah.
that is awesome. Um, well, I do agree that, you're technically just a little bit, it's kind of like you're hiring somebody, right?
Right.
So, what questions do you ask prospective team captains then?
I'm really want to know, first of all, are they really interested? Is this something that's interesting them? And if so, why? What is motivating them to want to be involved in this? I think they probably know what it is, but we're also selling a product. I think it in business terms. We have a product, and the product is to raise money. And some people just don't care about raising money. And if you want to be a team captain, you have to yeah. There's three questions I ask team captain. We train them. Do you know how to ask? Do you know how to ask? And then I say, do you know how to ask? Because it's really important that people understand in my case, my wife and I raised money for a Providence Baptist Church here in town. We're the team captains for them as well. And I haven't had too many people come to me and say, "Can I give you money?" It really turns out that I've got to ask them if they'd be interested in donating to this situation. So I would want a question on have they been in sales at all? Or have they had any opportunity to try to present a product and sell that product rather? Sometimes I ask people also, on a scale of 1 to 10, how dependable are you? And most will say 8, 9, 10, and that's fine. And I'll ask them about what they think is their weak sides, or maybe the things they're really working on, or things they're good at, just to get a conversation going, because we really need to understand who they are, and they need to understand who we are.
That's really good. Well, when you do all that and you've recruited team captains in the past, have you also followed that model? Like, how have you recruited team captains in the past?
There's been several ways, and there's no one way that I would say is the best way. It depends on your location and who you are and the teams you have. We happen to have in Charlotte right now a mature team captain team. They're not all, but many of them are 15 years, 30 years in crop. Not all recruiting chairmen or team leaders, team captains, but at least they're aware of it. So we've got an advantage there. But one of the things we've tried to do recently is to try to contact anybody we know or they know or the team captains know or the planning team knows, anybody that's been connected at all with crop in the past. I'm assuming this is somebody we do not have and we're recruiting a new person. And a couple of quick examples. We had a lady formed on our planning team who retired from her work. And she also dropped off the team at that point. And she had an interest in education. She was an educator. And we don't have money in the education field. So what we did, we asked her if she would match up with someone else that we know is in that area too. And would they consider joining together and being a team? Well, what happened was they are members of a sorority of educators. So they quickly wrapped up the team and got people connected. They have a large team now. They raised $10,000 last year, for example.
Wow.
I mean, that's just, they're not all $10,000. This one happens to be. We had another team that they used to be involved in the crop walk, but they dropped out 4 or 5 years ago. Well, we knew about that. Keep some record of teams that are in and out. So I called the missions committee at that church and said, "Hey, I know you all have been involved in the past of the crop walk. We'd like to bring you back into that." And I said, "Is there somebody I could talk to on the mission committee?" Well, make a long story shorter, they said, "Let me think about it." And they thought about it, and they came up with 2 people that agreed to be team captains. They didn't know much about crop, but they said, "We want to do it. We like to volunteer." And we brought them in last year, and they had a very successful year, raising $3,000 or $4,000. Had about 50 people joining the walk when the actual walk came on. So part of it is going back and finding any connections you have with anybody in the past. You may not know they want to do it, but at least there's a way to do it. We also have a sponsorship program. Some of you have sponsors and some of you don't, I think. We have a sponsorship program where we have companies and churches provide us extra money. They have a walk team, many of them do, and this helps us defray our costs so that the money we raise, we can tell them really goes back to where the mission is. It's not covering our expenses on that. So we have about 8 team members we've gotten off just sponsors. So that's another way that ask a sponsor to sponsor, but then ask a sponsor to be a team. And we found that worked as well. We're also starting one other thing. I'll be quick because I know we only have a few minutes on this. We started I call it a backup team. What do you want to call a backup plan? We have some teams that have left and there's nobody behind them. There's no backup in that team. And we've lost a couple this past year because somebody passed away. And we went to the team, the church, and they said, "Well, I don't know." And so there was nobody else in that church that handled crops. So we're trying to we're calling them now a succession plan. We want each team captain to have a successor that they can train and work with, so that when that happens, we've got a connection to get right back in. We lost some money on both of these teams because nobody followed through. So that's the other thing that we do. Well, it's just some other things, but they're the three things I think we do.
No,
I got
that's
another
really
thing. I got another thing later, but I'll wait for that.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you so much for sharing. And even with that succession planning, that's really good. Encourage all teams to do that. And we actually did a crop chat on that earlier this year. So if you want more info on succession planning, feel free to go and find that video. But thank you so much, so
Sure.
much, Dave. And we will definitely, I'm sure that there are going to be many questions with what you've asked or said so far. So we will definitely be coming back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So next, moving forward, y'all, we're going to be talking to Dave Rayner, another Dave. So glad you
Hey,
could
Dave.
join us, Dave. And so we're going to be talking about how to recruit for the planning team, because that's also very important. Dave, if we could just start with a few introductions about you, where you hail from, which walk you work with, and all that. Oh, I think you're muted. Let's see if we can unmute you real quick. Hello, technical difficulties.
I can't unmute him.
Okay, Dave. So yes, I'm sure you could hear us, but we can't hear you. So on your, I guess it's your right side, you should see a little green button with a microphone.
All right, should be able to hear me.
Yes.
All right.
Hello.
So yeah, a little bit of background. So I walk with a walk called Fenton, Lake Fenton, Linden, Holly. So it's 4 little towns in southeastern Michigan.
Okay.
A way different model, it sounds like, than what we heard from Dave. We have a single recruiting team that covers
Wow.
everything with sort of a handful of people on it. So it's a real different model.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, we have some of the same challenges I'm sure that you do, Dave. So I've been on the committee for 30 years, I think,
Wow.
and I've chaired it for the last, I don't know, 10 or 11 or something like that. And our walk, we have a fall walk. So our walk is actually coming up here in a few weeks. Our walk is the 24th of September.
Okay. Awesome. So that's also an interesting model, just a single recruitment team. I'm definitely going to be asking questions on that later. But when looking for recruiting for a planning team specifically, because we know it's different from team captains,
Sure.
what characteristics should recruiters be looking for?
So actually a lot of similarities to what Dave said, I think. For starters, I said, I mean, you need doers, not followers. I mean, you really do. And we all know those people that, I mean, our whole lives we've worked in organizations or businesses where you sort of use the 80-20 rule, right? That 20% of the people do 80% of the work and vice versa. It's just human nature. So you try to identify that 20% that really are the doers. Not just the followers. Not that we don't need followers. We need lots of them walking and raising money and all those things, but we really look for the doers. Again, I'll repeat what Dave said. You need people, we look for people that have got a history with crop. So the first place to look for team members are folks that you see year after year after year after year that are the walkers, right? They're the walkers and the donators and the people that are always engaged in the process. Because you do need, as you had said, Dave, you need people with some passion about the organization. So it's really hard to get somebody that doesn't really know much about crop and say, hey, how would you like to be on a team to help organize this thing?
Right.
So that's the third thing. We would look for people with good connections. So we're in small towns. So it's of a lot of value to look for folks that that have a small business and set on the Chamber of Commerce, that are connected to other organizations in the city like Kiwanis and veterans groups and things like that, to look for people who are particularly active in their church community. So like most places, I think, but the majority of the organizations that we work with are churches. And so we're looking for the folks that already sit on the mission committees or the outreach committees or whatever your organization sort of calls that. So
Yeah.
it's that people who have good connections. And then people that are involved in organizations that have similar goals. So for example, I'll give you a couple of examples here. So there's an organization in town here that's, I think, a nationwide organization called Family Promise. It's an organization that helps to house homeless families. It's great to look for people that are engaged in those kind of similar organizations, people that volunteer at or work at food pantries, because those people have a passion for the same thing that we have a passion for.
Right.
We're trying to help other people who are hungry or in need. So those kind of things. So I would say those 3 or 4 characteristics are things we try to look for.
So, I mean, you were kind of talking about it with your examples, but could you share with us one way you were successful, you and your team, in recruiting for a planning team member?
Sure. So yeah, so we have a woman who has been in the walk for as long as I can remember. We've seen her walking for years and years and years. She happens to own a small business in town in Fenton. She owns a jazzercise company, actually. And so, and she goes to one of the churches that's been very active in the past. So we've noticed this for years and years and years. She's always been there. So one year, we asked her if she wanted to get, not on the planning team, but asked her if she wanted to get more engaged in the walk itself. So one of the things we do, and I think most of the walks do, is try to have some activities along the route. And so because she owned a jazzercise company, we asked her if she would come one year and set up a jazzercise along the way. So she actually came. She brought, I don't know, 8 or 10 customers of hers, and they set up a jazzercise along the walk, and people could walk along and stop, and they could stop and do jazzercise for a while, and then they could keep walking.
Wow.
And so we asked her to do that one year. She did it a couple of years in a row, and you could tell from that she was pretty engaged. We also knew that one of the members, in fact, the active member from the church that she was at, was going to leave in the next couple of years. So after a couple of years of that, we asked her if she wanted to be in the planning team. She knew more about it. She'd been there. She had seen the people planning and setting up the walk and those sorts of things. And so she said yes. And she's now been a member of the team for probably 4 years and a very active. So, so getting her engaged, I think, in an easier way than just jumping right in was helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that aspect of just getting someone engaged a little bit before, so that they learn what the crop walk is about and all that, and before that you just join the planning team. I think that's awesome. That's great. So, and I don't know if you, or like you were saying earlier, your team that's focused on recruitment, and maybe you've talked a little bit to it before, but how have you all recruited for a planning team in the past?
So, couple things. So first of all, like I mentioned, like I think most walks, primarily the walkers come from local churches.
Yeah.
So we found it really helpful, particularly if you're going to a new church. It's particularly helpful to engage the pastor or the priest first. Sometimes it's a really big church, and we don't have really big churches in Fenton, but for larger churches that have, sometimes they'll have a pastor whose focus is just mission. But for the most part, we're smaller congregations. So getting the priest or the pastor engaged is really, really helpful. And if you can get them engaged and they're engaged, you can either ask them specifically for someone from the organization that they think would have that same passion, or you get to know the organization itself and go through them. But that's always helpful. If you can get a pastor that's for example, one of the things we've done in the past is we get pastor challenges or priest challenges, where one year, for example, we had neighboring churches that had a priest that said, if you get the most walkers on the church next door, I'll shave my head, or I'll shave my beard. And
oh my gosh.
the pastor in the other church said, if you guys get more than we do, then I'll dye my hair green.
Wow.
But so it wasn't to say that, that was just an anecdotal thing, but the year that we did that, we had more activity and more interest and got recruiters from most of those churches because the churches were so much more involved. So instead of getting, again, we're a small walk, instead of getting 15 walkers from the church that year, we got 35 walkers from that church, and we got a recruiter that was engaged. So that's one thing that's been real helpful. We've also tried to do, not as consciously as you have, David, with succession, because we're not quite that big, but we sort of try to keep track of where people are going in their lives and when they're likely to go and how long. You know, we do the ask every year, do you guys want to do this again next year or feel comfortable with? And sometimes folks will say, yeah, I'm going to do it another year, but that's probably it. So one of the things that's been helpful is try to do a buddy kind of thing, is to say, not only do we have a succession plan, we actually want people to come in and participate that year. So when somebody leaves from the Presbyterian church and we know they're going to be here a year or two more, we'll ask them to bring anybody in with them the last year they're on the planning team, as to sit and watch and see what's going on, and then become the chair, a person the next year. So we've had some luck with that. This one we didn't have luck with, but I think it's worth mentioning. So one of the things that we've always wanted to do was get the schools more engaged. So we have in the four towns that we're in, we have 4 schools that all have kids in high school that need volunteer points and all those kinds of things. And we always thought, if we can get to the right people, we'll get those schools engaged, not just the kids, but we can get somebody on the planning team.
Mm-hmm.
So last year, we spent a lot of energy. We went to every single high school, and we went to they all call them something different, but to their honors group or their, they all have some group of kids that do that, and they all need points.
Yeah.
And we gave presentations to all of them. We talked to all of them, and they were all really excited about it. And we got nobody.
Oh man. Oh.
But I think the lesson there was, and it's part of what I think successful planning is, the lesson there really was, we didn't leave the room, and this goes back to your salesman discussion, Dave. We didn't leave the room with somebody that had the ball that said, yeah, I'm your person, contact me, follow up through me. We let it go, and it was unsuccessful because of that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, definitely getting the youth involved is, I think that's a challenge for everybody, from what I've heard. But it also goes to putting in the effort, because at least you guys did it, right? Someone knows, and you never know. Maybe in a few years that could produce something, but you guys put in the effort. So last question for you. When you think about everything that you said with planning teams, what are like 4 foundational basics you can think of when it comes to recruiting for a planning team? Like some 4 things that people can just take away and start implementing.
So the first thing I think is personal connections. It's about asking and engaging people that somebody somewhere on the team, or as I said, even through the priest, whatever it is, somebody on the team has a personal connection with, rather than kind of the salesman equivalent of a cold call. Being really specific about what you're asking for. To walk up to somebody and say, hey, can you be on the crop planning team? It's just too nebulous. If people get nervous about those kind of asks. But if you can say, can you be on the crop planning team? What we really need is, we meet 6 times a year for an hour and a half at this location. The day of the walk, you need to do these sorts of things. We ask each one of you to have some responsibility in some area. It's recruiting, or it's advertising, or it's walk logistics, or it's something every year. That's what it means. And this is how much time you need to put in a year. And this is what you get out of it. So being really specific about the task. Being clear about, this is a big one for me, and I know sometimes people's eyes glaze over, but for me, it's really important for folks to understand the value of what we're doing. Sometimes we get, I know I do personally, sometimes you get so carried away in the doing that you forget why you're doing it. And
That's
the
so
work
good.
that we do is really, really important. And I can tell you that here, the biggest incentive for folks is when you start talking about the 25% that stays in the community.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really a big sell for people that you're asking to help out. So that's a big one. And then finally, and this is sort of probably isn't the traditional way to ask anything, but I need to give people a way out. I want to make sure that people understand this is not a lifetime commitment for you. I'd like you to come and try this for a year. And if you like it and it works, that's great. And if it doesn't, that's okay, right? This is not a lifetime commitment, because often committees that we get on are lifetime commitments, or at least they seem like it.
Yeah.
Those are the
Oh,
core.
I actually really like that. That's important. Just so that people don't feel bound all the time. Like, man, like they might get a year where they're like not feeling it and they feel like, well, this is a lifetime commitment, and it's not, you know? Um, yeah, and then if you're not feeling the planning team or being on the committee, then it probably won't translate well with the work that you're doing in recruitment and all these other things, right?
Exactly right.
So
That's
yeah, it
exactly.
all goes into that. Thank you so much for your insight, Dave. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure we have questions for you as well, so we will be getting to that.
Right.
And last but not least, we have Adam Smedberg, if he wants to pop on. Hello, Adam. So I obviously know you, but we're gonna go through the same introduction that we've done with everybody else. So, where are you from? What walk or walks do you work with?
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Smedberg. I actually work with Church World Service. I'm based here in New England, in Massachusetts. I work with about 12 to 13 crop hunger walks here in New England, as well as part of upstate New York, as well as a group of congregations here throughout the area on different programs as well that are independent of crop walks. So, and I got to tell you, Dave Rayner, I had you talked about the pastor challenge, and we got a chance to share a story of that back this past spring. One of my churches did some work with one in the Worcester area, where the pastor challenged them to raise. He let them choose the amount, and they ended up almost initially doubling it. I think after a couple of years, like almost 1.5 times what they raised. And he and his family are from the Philadelphia area, and so he wore a Patriots jersey giving the sermon on a Sunday as when they reached the goal to do that. So those pastor challenges can be very fun, very creative. So I highly recommend those to all of our viewers. Consider those. Those are a great opportunity. But I digress.
Definitely. I would hate to wear a Patriots jersey, but we move. So we're gonna have Adam here today speaking on how to recruit for civic groups. Kind of like what we've seen, this pattern, is that a majority of our volunteers, whether it's team captains, planning teams, or people who are walking, come from congregations, which is great, which is awesome. But we also do want to kind of branch out, just because hunger and poverty specifically does not only affect a small group, it affects the globe, it affects everybody. And a lot more people care about it. So we're going to be talking about how to kind of extend outside of congregations and figure out how to recruit from civic groups. So Adam, if you could kind of explain what a civic group is, or some examples.
Sure. Now, I want to just preface our conversation today is going to focus around 3 organizations primarily. There are significantly other larger pool to pull from, but we are going to be talking primarily about Kiwanis, Rotary, and Lions clubs. Now, there's a couple different reasons. One is those are the ones I've had the most experience working with. But by all means, if viewers who are watching this have experience with Elks, Eagles, Knights of Columbus, VFWs. I believe they're down in the South, the Red Hats, ladies. By all means, what we're going to discuss today can absolutely apply to them as well. I just don't have the experience working with them like I do with these other organizations. So that is why our conversation is primarily going to focus around these three organizations. And then the other part I will throw in there, again, just kind of picking up what David was saying, these are all organizations that have high school groups tied into them. And so I know David was talking about, with honor societies and different programs within the school, these tend to be a little bit more independent. They do meet at the school, but they are affiliated with these organizations. So there is the opportunity to recruit the high school students. And these programs are called LEOs. They are tied into the Lions Club. Interact is tied into Rotary. And Key Club is tied into Kiwanis. So when we're talking about these would be great clubs for you to look into and not only see do they have the adult versions in your area, but also the high school groups that can also be recruited and brought into to support the walk. And that can be with both fundraising as well as volunteers the day of. We had a group that helped make the punch at one of my walks last year. So they can definitely be recruited to help with different things at these events.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Just because I think we have like a Rotary Club around me, but yet to make that connect. So that's really awesome to know that we can connect with different groups like that. So if you could kind of explain, well, one, how can you make a connection with these groups? How
Sure.
does someone take the step to do that?
Absolutely. Now, in the chat, I know Heather put the links in earlier, but we'll throw them back in there again here for folks to, you can just go ahead and really cut and paste these right out of the chat. These are the links right to not only these organizations' websites, these are taking you right to the club finders, what they call the club finders pages at these websites. So they're in the chat. You can cut and paste them right out of there. Heather, if you want to just scroll down just a little bit for us, please. All right, so you see here the location. So Heather, why don't we throw in, we'll do zip code, we'll do mine just to kind of show it. So if we had the Greater Wales Crop Hunger Walk here, it'd be 01081. And you all know what zip code to find me at. 81, there we go. And hit search, please. And scroll down, and there you can see all the Lions clubs that are in my area. And you can see not only can you view the pages for these clubs, it tells you who the club presidents are, it tells you where they meet, but the contact is right there for you. They have their own kind of email system, so you're not even having to go into Outlook and cut and paste people's email addresses. You can just contact them right here through their sites, and it sends it directly to them. So they know they're not getting stuff, I think it's kind of their way of also trying to filter out spam filters and things like that. But this will contact them directly. And when it comes to reaching out to these clubs, there are a variety of things that they can do to help support local crop hunger walks. They can be sponsors for both the walk as well as for individual walkers. They can volunteer at the walk itself, or set up a team to walk. I highly encourage, as you do your initial outreach, volunteering to speak at one of the meetings. It's a great way to educate folks on what the crop walk does, who the communities are that the crop walk supports, and not only does it support international, but it supports local pantries as well. So all of these can be engaged when you do, these can all be things that you can talk about when you reach out to them. And you usually get one of a few different responses. You get the, yes, we'd love to help out. How can we do it? What are our next steps? And I'll let you do that. You may have some folks who come back and say, hey, we'd love to support. We actually already support somebody from, we support Belinda over at First Congregational, which would be, you say, great, that's fantastic. We'd love to, is there still an opportunity for us to at least come by and talk with you guys so you know why you're supporting Belinda and the great work that Belinda is raising funds for? And so there are a lot of different ways that you can get some really good responses from these organizations. And the other thing is you have to understand is with especially these 3 different organizations, not only do they have local groups that they support, they all have international outreach as well that they do through their international hubs. Kiwanis International, Rotary International, Lions International. For Lions, it's Vision. You probably see the glasses drop-off boxes in different communities. Rotary tends to do a lot of work. It has in the past with polio vaccines and distributing those in the countries that don't have access to it. And Kiwanis, one of their big programs was neonatal tetanus shots in countries where children were not getting vaccinated as babies. So they all have that international outreach side of them. So you are working with a population that wants to not only support local organizations but also international organizations.
It's awesome, and it's very easy. Like this, you could just, go onto one of the sites that we have put here in the chat, and we will be sure to send out with the video. You just look it up, and you can find, a group in your area. That's very simple, and you know who to contact. They'll send it for. That's perfect. All the work is done for you. You just need to put in the effort. So that's awesome.
And one of the things that we talk about here at CWS when we're doing outreach to different groups, we always say, hey, I'm happy to come out and give you as a pastor a Sunday off, if you'd like us to come out and speak.
Yeah.
Same with these. If you guys are looking for something for a program for one of your meetings, I'd be happy to come out and give one and talk about the work we do. And typically also get you maybe a free lunch or breakfast for those meetings because those meetings are all around meals. So,
Yeah.
So that's the way that I have worked with a lot of these groups in the past. We've gotten a variety of organizations that have gotten involved in different ways. So that's kind of our piece.
Piece. Cool. Well, one last question. So could you give us an example of how you or a community you serve has successfully recruited or started incorporating a civic group into one of your walks and like what they do?
Yeah, so one of my groups up in New Hampshire did some outreach to these groups, especially coming out of COVID, where we were trying to find out what these groups were doing, how were they meeting, were they meeting virtually or in person, and the group was interested in learning more about the walk and the work that we were doing, also coming out of COVID. So the conversation got started, and my coordinator up there got a chance to come out and speak at one of the meetings. He talked about the walk, what they do at the walk. Some of the folks were familiar with the walk just because it's been around for 30 plus years, so they'd heard about it in their community. And so they decided, you know what, let's put a team together and let's get involved. And so they did, and they raised a few $1,000s for that walk. And remained involved in the community. So there is that opportunity because you do have a lot of like-minded, like-thought individuals who want to see and want to serve and are looking for those opportunities.
Thank you so much for that example. And that are all the presenters we have so far for this event. So please feel free to populate the questions if you have any, and we will be waiting for that. In the meantime, let me ask a few questions that I have. So for Sir Dave Rayner, when you were talking about your single recruitment team, so could you tell us a little bit about that? Is that just team members on the planning committee whose sole position or goal is to just recruit maybe all year round or throughout the walk season, or how
Uh,
is that?
They are they are the recruiters, they are the captains for their locations, they are the everythings. So they really are. So I mean there is a chair to that group, and that's me. Uh, but our goal really, we've done it other ways in the past, but our goal is to try to have somebody on the planning team from every organization that we work with. Now, it's not completely true. We have 7 churches that are very active, and we have each one of them, we have somebody from that's the recruiter, coordinator, everything from that. There are exceptions. I mean, we have, for example, we have a couple of smaller churches that have, 3 or 4 walkers a year, sort of thing. That one of us will go over and recruit at, go over and meet one time with them. But for the most part, those people are the everything. So it's sort of the way it works in a small town. So if you've got, I'll just give you an example. We have somebody from the Presbyterian Church, and they're the recruiter for that church. They get the walkers for that church. This one happens to be the person that also takes on responsibility for social media and advertising. They do all of that. We have somebody from the Episcopal Church, that's me, and I get all the walkers for our church. I organize the committee, and I happen to be responsible for walk logistics. So that's my job. So you sort of play multiple hats when
Yeah.
you're working in a smaller organization.
Yeah.
That's the way we work it. And like I said, our attempt is every year, our goal at the first meeting is we all head off to try to find our goal, each of us every year, is to go off and try to find 2 other organizations that we can engage. Whether it's, and we've tried Kiwanis and Key Clubs and things like that. So that's what we try to do every year. Everybody has that responsibility. We do it for the first month or so of the year. It's March, April kind of time frame, and then we go, and then whatever we've got, we move on to planning for the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight. Dave Miller,
Yes.
so you we're talking about kind of having that like sales business mindset when it comes to recruiting for these team captains. Could you give us maybe like a small script or an example of how you would make your ask?
For the team captains you're talking about now? For the team captains? Yeah, I really think about them as not only volunteers, but I think them as customers. I think I'm as a customer because what do we do with customers? Well, we build relationships. That if I had a customer, I'm more concerned about my relationship with them. So what we try to do is make sure that we not only make them feel that way, but also talk in those terms. We talk about goals. You mentioned goals a minute ago. We have goals for every individual team. We set up goals here and say, okay, first thing we say is, what is your goal this year? How'd you do last year? What's your goal this year? Not only for money, we're raising money. That's the ultimate thing, is trying to raise money here. But how do you do that? How do you set a goal, and what is your goal? And we think about not only goal for money, how many walkers do you plan to recruit this year from your team? So goals is a big thing we talk about. I think it's a business way of talking as well. We're not trying to be a business, but we are a business. As a matter of fact, that's what we're there for, to find a way. So I think talking in those terms about being a customer, and I failed to mention that we have one other thing. One of the things we do here, we have about 50 team captains here in Charlotte, and it's hard to keep up with everybody. So we have, one of our goals is to make sure that we focus on them. We focus on them. We make sure that they know they're appreciated. We make sure they know they're recognized. We make sure we keep in touch with them. We make sure we communicate with them. We make sure because in our larger city, people come and go. You're here today, going tomorrow, and there's not as much of that we're here. So we've got to work initially to make sure people really feel that they're important. that what they do is important. And if we can communicate that and talk about in terms of why we're here and what's our mission. Karen and I have stayed in crop for 13 years because we believe in the mission.
Right.
We believe in the mission. And if you believe in the mission, you got your 50% there, maybe 75%. So what we try to do is just make sure that people, and can I say one other thing? It's not on your question, but we talk about recruiting, and that's what we need to do. But in our case, we thought about retaining.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want somebody, like you said, David, you know, it's not a lifetime job. But we had a training session just the other day, 2 training sessions, matter of fact, and we asked the people how long have they been involved and how long have they been trainers. The majority of ours that were there, 25, 35 years. We've walked here in Charlotte for 40. This is our 45th year of walking. And so we recognize we got a group that's been there. So what we're going to do is try to retain them. Because if you can retain somebody from leaving, you don't have to recruit somebody to fill a place. You know, I mean, and you want to do that as well. But I think retaining people and focusing on them and making sure that they, like I said, we've got a bunch of them, and we're trying to spread it out. So, okay, I try to call some of the same ones each year, so they know who Dave Miller is. And James Laney has these too, and that's a way of focusing better on individuals so they feel important. I think retention is an important part of what we do. Try to do.
Yeah, and that's a good note as well. I did see that some people had some of their hands raised. If you could just put your questions in the chat or the questions bar, I'll be sure to read them out. But for you, Adam, when you're talking about these like Lions groups and these different types of civic groups, apart from sponsoring, because you mentioned it a little bit, what all can they get involved in with the Crop Hunter Walk? Like some ideas to give some people.
Yeah, so really they can get into just about any level of walk need. I mean, these groups, you know, these are, as we, you know, civic groups, so they're civically minded individuals. They can absolutely help if you need folks for the day of, you know, think about the folks who you need help, you know, water stations or registration, handing out t-shirts if you're doing t-shirts, all these different things. These are things that they can definitely help with out with the day of, and it's also with the high school groups, because the high school groups can help with that as well. They can have a team. There's no restrictions as far as them being able to raise funds for one organization or another. So they can definitely have a team at the walk. So there really isn't any kind of restriction when it comes to their involvement with these events. None of these groups, you know, there's no we can't do this or we can't do that mentality, or you know, imposed restriction like we have seen with other groups, whether it's youth or otherwise, that, you know, it's against the bylaws or something like that for them to be able to fundraise or something like that, because any funds they raise have to go to their organization. These guys are able to do anything to support the walk without that constriction.
Thank you. And I guess last question for Dave Miller. Someone says, I remember you set up a brainstorming meeting of veteran team captains to help identify and reach out to new and past groups. How did that work out? And do you recommend that approach?
Yes, that's the first time we've done that this year. We didn't have everybody there. It was kind of a select group, because these are the people that had been around, and we really wanted to let them know that we need some feedback. We need what we're doing. What do we need to do, and what can you do for us? And we had some things that while we shared what we like to see as well, and they shared some things there. So I would absolutely recommend it. They recommended communication was an issue. That they won't feel like they were being communicated enough, even though we say we do. We obviously are not doing it enough. So they said we need some more communications. The other one we got back from them was some of them aren't very computer savvy, like me, and they have a little trouble registering and getting in and doing this and doing that, because that's where you can really raise the money, is on the online donations, which is what we're trying to build that more and more each time. So they said we need some more training. So this past, we had our captain training session this past week, and we had 3 people there. And when the people came in, we pick up the materials while we're there. And they also had 3 with their laptop computers ready, and showed a number of people how to register, how to do this, how to do this. So yes, I mean, I wouldn't have thought about that. I guess I should have, but didn't. I would recommend, because you may find something you need to know.
Right.
And we needed them to do a few things too. We needed to find out, do you know anybody else in your community? Maybe, yeah, we had a lady who left the church. She just needed to leave the church. She went to another church, and so we're losing a team captain. So I said, what church are you going to? She said, this church. I said, do they have a walk team? Are they in crop walk? No. I said, well, you know how to do that now. Why don't you see if you can recruit them? And she's in the process of recruiting that team right now. So there's a lot of things we ask them to do, and they ask us to do. Yes, absolutely. Consider having a feedback session.
Yeah. I know we're gonna run out of time. Dave Rayner, I don't know if you're still here, but there's a question for you here. But in the meantime, Adam, someone is asking, have you run into roadblocks when approaching civic groups? And what have they been?
So I would say the most consistent roadblock we would receive would be folks who don't respond to those email requests, or don't. And I would say, don't hit send, but don't type something out every day and send a different message out every day if you don't hear back. I would recommend, send the initial message. If you're a fall walk, I would send it probably late May, early June, to try and get that summer schedule or that September schedule before your October or September walk. If you are a fall walk, send it, closer to the end of the year, and then again try and get into that time of that 90 to 60 day sweet spot leading up to the walk. So you want to send out a little bit beforehand. But I would say, that your biggest roadblock would probably be just people not responding. And again, I wouldn't, you'd love to have, you saw the number that were within, say, 10 or 15 miles where I live. Yeah, it would be great if all 8 or 9 of them responded, to that first message. Odds are you would get a couple that respond. And then, if you send another message out, oh, hey, yeah, it just got into the bottom of my email, or I forgot. You'll hear things like that. But I would just tell you, don't give up, but don't be the person who's going to send a message every 2 or 3 days. Like I said, let it breathe. Give it a week or so before you send that next message out. Because again, somebody could be on vacation, somebody could be dealing with the death in the family. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives. So, but just know, you are sending it through the way that they want you to send it to them. It was kind of what Dave was saying before about the technology and, trying to reach people where they are. This is where they are. This is how they would like you to reach out to them. I would recommend just being respectful of that. They don't want you to have their number at this point. So don't be, Google searching this person, trying to be the PI to find all their information and everything else. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And definitely last question of the day for Dave Rayner. So the person says, congratulations, Dave R. We are a small walk team too. Any thoughts on the succession plan Dave M mentioned and how you might initiate / run it on a smaller scale? And biggest problem in a small town, similar organizations / nonprofits doing about the same thing. So the pool of volunteers and funds is small. So maybe partnerships, or what else could you suggest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the idea that Dave brought up of succession planning is probably the best thing I can think of. One thing we've thought of in the past, we've never really engaged it, we've never been able to do it, but one thing we've thought of in the past is making the planning team a specific period of time so that you could do the plans. I mean, it's really hard to do when I've been there for 30 years and two other people on the team have been there for 25 years. Is to say, okay, we'd like you to do this. We've also thought of it because the ask itself might be easier to do if we said, we'd like you to be on this planning committee for 5 years. And if we knew that's what it was and we had a regular rotation, and if we're smart about it, a staggered rotation, so everybody didn't leave all at once, then I think we'd have an easier time doing that kind of succession planning. And what we do is say, here's your job, here's what you're going to do for 5 years. We need to help, if you can, we want you to do it for 5 years. And at the end of 3 years, we want you to bring in somebody that's going to take your place. And so it's sort of a regular rotation. As far as competing with other groups doing the same thing, I don't know that that's unique to small towns. I mean, that's true everywhere. In bigger towns, it's just at a bigger scale. I mean, I'm sure Dave Miller's got the same issues in Charlotte as we have in the little town of Fenton. I don't know. I think that's just, you have to appeal to people and appeal to their passions and know what those passions are. And you got to be willing to say, if this isn't your thing this year, that's okay.
Well, that was another year, honestly. But
I would say at least here, we do have a walk a week, it seems like. There's not just the crop walk. It's what week is everybody going to be and large things. So it's hard to get in because of that. There's too many things out there too. So we fight that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure we all do.
Well, thank you all so much to our attendees and our presenters. Such good information. I know I'm definitely going to be rewatching this back. But thank you all for joining us today. And remember, we also have another crop chat next week. It's going to be super fun, and we're going to be focused on advocacy. So thank you all so much for joining again, and we'll see you all next week.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Enjoyed it.